Right now, somewhere in this city, there is a woman across the table from a man she thinks makes $40,000 a year. She has no idea he could buy the restaurant they're sitting in without checking his balance. She has no idea he owns the building next to it too. He is wearing a shirt that cost $12 and he picked it on purpose because the $12 shirt has never once lied to him about who wanted to be there and who wanted what was underneath it. That man is me. I have $31 million, and for the last 4 months, the woman I'm falling for thinks I drive for a delivery app on the side to make rent. This isn't a flex. This isn't a story about money. This is a story about the one thing money cannot buy, cannot fake, and cannot fast track, and about the 3 rules I built after it almost destroyed me twice. Stay until the end because the 3rd rule is the one that changes everything, and by the time I tell you what happened on the night I almost broke it, you're going to ask yourself the same question I ask myself every single day. If you had everything, would you ever let anyone find out? Or would the not knowing be the only proof you ever really trust again? My name doesn't matter for this story, so let's just say it's Leon, 36 years old. 10 years ago, I was sleeping on a mattress in the back of a storage unit I wasn't technically allowed to sleep in, running numbers on foreclosed duplexes by flashlight because the power had been shut off. Today, that same discipline owns 41 properties, 3 small manufacturing companies, and a logistics business that nobody at this table has ever heard of because nobody at this table is supposed to. When people imagine having money, they imagine the upgrade: better car, better watch, better table at the better restaurant. Nobody imagines the part where money quietly poisons every new relationship before it's even had a chance to become one. Nobody warns you that the moment someone finds out what you're worth, you stop being a person to them and start being a number wearing a face. You become the answer to their problem before you've even become someone they actually know. I learned that twice. Both times expensive. Both times my own fault, because I did the one thing you should never do. I let the money walk into the room before I did. The first time, her name was Bianca. Told her everything on date 6 because I was proud of what I'd built and wanted someone to be proud of it with me. She was warm and funny and seemed unbothered by it, right up until the exact week I told her the second property closed. Suddenly there were hints about her lease being up. Suddenly her car needed work she didn't want to bring up. Suddenly every plan we made had a 5-star restaurant gravitational pull to it. I don't think she was evil. I think she was human, and I'd handed a human being a shortcut, and most people, if you hand them a shortcut, they take it. That's not a character flaw unique to her. That's just what temptation does when you remove all the friction. The second time was worse because I thought I'd learned my lesson. I waited longer, told her on month 3 instead of week 6. Same result, just slower. The timeline changes, the ending doesn't, when the foundation the relationship was built on gets swapped out from under it. So I stopped confessing early. I built a system instead. 3 rules. Every person who wants close to me has to survive all 3 before they get the truth, and in 4 years, exactly 1 person has made it past Rule 3. Her name is Maya, and this is her story, which means it's also mine. Rule 1 is simple to say, and brutal to live. No mention of money, success, ownership, or anything that could be reverse engineered into wealth for 100 days. Not a hint, not a joke, not a slip disguised as humility. 100 days because 30 is long enough to fake being a good person and short enough that nobody's real self shows up yet. 100 is long enough that keeping up an act becomes more exhausting than just being honest. So if there's nothing real underneath, it collapses on its own. And I get to watch it collapse from a safe distance instead of from inside a relationship I already love. I met Maya at a laundromat. Not staged. My actual dryer broke in the actual small apartment I keep for exactly this reason. The one with the water stain on the ceiling and the window unit that rattles like it's trying to escape. She was folding a stack of scrubs. She's a nurse, 3rd shift at a hospital across town, and she asked if I could watch her machine while she ran to move her car before the meter ran out. I said sure. She came back 12 minutes later with 2 coffees from the gas station next door, handed me one without asking if I wanted it, and said, "You looked like you needed this more than I did." She wasn't wrong. I told her I did freelance logistics consulting. True, technically in the same way it's technically true that a lion is a house cat. Vague enough that nobody follows up. Boring enough that nobody wants to. For the first month, our dates cost less than $20 combined. Diner breakfasts. A free outdoor movie night in the park where we sat on a beach towel because neither of us thought to bring chairs. I watched her reaction every single time a check arrived because that reaction tells you almost everything. Some people's eyes do a fast, involuntary math behind a smile that doesn't quite reach, calculating what they're owed, what they can extract, whether this is worth the investment. Maya's eyes did nothing. She'd just reach for her wallet like it was the most natural motion in the world, and I'd wave her off and she'd say, "Next one's mine." and then actually mean it, actually pay next time, actually track whose turn it was like we were keeping honest score instead of running a performance. Day 40-something, she mentioned, almost as an aside while we were washing dishes at her place, that she'd had to put off a car repair because her paycheck landed weird that month. No ask attached, not even a pause for me to offer. She just kept talking, moved straight into a story about a patient who'd tried to sneak his dog into the ICU in a duffel bag. I sat there with the ability to fix her entire month with one transfer. And I said nothing, because the test was never whether I'd help. Of course I'd help. The test was whether she'd angled for it. She hadn't. She'd forgotten she even said it by the time we finished the dishes. That's the kind of detail you can't fake for 100 days. You can fake charm for 2 weeks. You cannot fake forgetting to ask for money for 100. Rule 2 exists because Rule 1 only tells you who someone is when things are easy. Anyone is lovely across a nice dinner someone else is quietly paying for. The real information only shows up when things get inconvenient, uncomfortable, a little bit bad, because that's when people stop performing and start reacting. Week 11, I suggested a weekend trip. Not the coast, not anywhere that would need explaining. I picked a cabin 2.5 hours out, $61 a night, the kind of place where the listing photos are clearly 10 years old and the water heater takes its time, and there's a taxidermied fish on the wall that nobody's proud of, but nobody's taken down either. This is where the system does its real work because money doesn't reveal character. Inconvenience does. We got there in a downpour, the kind that turns a gravel driveway into soup. Maya got out of the car, looked at the cabin, looked at the rain, and started laughing before we'd even made it to the porch. Not the polite kind of laugh people do to cover disappointment. The real kind. The kind that doubles a person over. "This is exactly what I pictured when you said cabin," she said. "And somehow it's still worse, and I love it. We had 4 eggs, half a loaf of bread going stale at the corners, and a jar of pickles somebody left behind 2 renters ago. Neither of us suggested driving back for real groceries. I scrambled the eggs badly. She burned the toast on one side and ate it anyway without a word about it. We ate standing at the counter because the table was buried under a deck of cards from a game we'd invented an hour earlier, with rules we were making up as we went, something we'd started calling Ruin, which had somehow acquired 11 house rules by the second round, none of which either of us could fully explain by morning. It rained the entire weekend. The Wi-Fi didn't reach past the kitchen. There was one working lamp in the whole cabin, and we spent Saturday night reading by it, her head on my leg, not talking, not needing to. Somewhere in that stretch of silence, I realized what I was actually watching for wasn't whether she was having fun. It was whether she'd forgotten there was an audience. She had. Completely. That's the tell. Not happiness, the absence of performance. I've run this exact test before on people who failed it in under 90 minutes. There was a woman 2 years earlier who spent the entire drive out asking, with increasing thinness in her patience, whether there wasn't somewhere actually nice within range. I turned the car around at a gas station 40 minutes in and called it a scheduling conflict. There was no scheduling conflict. There was a $60 cabin doing exactly the job it was built to do. There was another one before her who made it all the way there and spent the first hour photographing the worst angles of the place, the mildew stain, the broken porch step. For what I understood correctly, would become a story for her friends where she was the good sport surviving something beneath her. I drove her home that same night, told her I had an early morning. I did not have an early morning. The cabin had already told me everything I needed to know. Maya left a 5-star review for the place on our way out. Said the water heater had character. Rule 3 is the one that costs me the most because it requires me to disappear a little, on purpose, and watch what happens to the space I leave behind. Week 14, I told Maya I was slammed with work. A real sounding kind of slammed, believable because it was partly true. My kitchen sink had actually been leaking for 2 weeks in the small apartment. The one I let people see, the one furnished just enough to survive a surprise visit, and not one detail more. I told her I'd be spending Saturday underneath it with a wrench I didn't fully know how to use, which happened to be completely accurate because at some point I'd decided I'd rather actually fix the thing than fake fixing it. The lie only ever needs to cover the why. The how can be entirely real. I expected one of 2 outcomes. Either she'd vanish into her own weekend without a second thought, fine, healthy, normal, or she'd start performing concern, sending check-in texts every hour, making my absence about her. Maya did neither. Around 2 in the afternoon, she sent one photo. Her lunch, a sad-looking hospital cafeteria sandwich, no caption, the kind of text that doesn't need anything back. I didn't respond for almost 3 hours because my hands were actually wet and actually covered in plumber's tape, and actually cursing at a pipe fitting that had made me its enemy. When I finally texted back, she didn't ask why it took so long. She just asked if I'd gotten the leak fixed. I had not gotten the leak fixed. I had made it marginally worse. But that wasn't the part that mattered. What mattered was that respecting my time, even my fake, ordinary, unremarkable time, came naturally to her. Nobody coached her into that. Nobody told her she was being tested. She just did it. the way a person does something they've never once thought to do differently. By week 15, I noticed something uncomfortable creeping in, which is that I wasn't sure anymore if I was still testing her, or if I'd just quietly become a man who liked fixing his own sink badly on a Saturday, with someone who didn't need a performance to want to stay. Here's the part nobody puts in the highlight reel of having real money. The system works. I'd recommend it to anyone in my position, and I have, quietly, to a guy named Marcus who made his money in commercial insurance and calls me sometimes late at night to ask whether the woman he's seeing feels like a real one or a waited out one. His phrase, not mine. He called on a Wednesday this time. Her name is Priya, day 60-something. He thinks, though he'd admittedly stopped counting exactly a couple weeks back, which he said like it embarrassed him, like losing count was a small failure of discipline instead of a sign that something was actually working the way it's supposed to. He wanted to know if it's normal that he'd almost told her about a deal that closed last month, the number half out of his mouth before he caught it and turned it into a joke about a coworker instead. I told him that's the entire danger zone. Not the people who never feel the pull to confess, but the ones who feel it constantly and have to keep catching themselves mid-sentence over and over for months. He laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that's mostly relief at being told he isn't uniquely bad at this. I asked if Priya had passed the cabin test yet. He said he hadn't run it. I told him to run it. He said he didn't want to know yet, which is its own answer, and I let him keep it because I remember exactly what it feels like to not want to know yet. After we hung up, I sat there with the phone in my hand longer than the call had lasted, thinking about how strange it is to hand someone else a system with total confidence while privately suspecting your own version of it has quietly stopped being a system at all and started being something closer to just a relationship, with extra steps built in out of old scar tissue. Week 16. We're on Maya's couch, her roommate's cat asleep against my leg. Some rerun playing that neither of us is actually watching. Out of nowhere, not suspicious, just curious, the kind of question people ask each other for fun, she asks what I'd do if I suddenly had a stupid, ridiculous amount of money. I almost laughed. I didn't. I told her something deflective and true at the exact same time. That I'd probably keep doing exactly what I'm already doing because I already like my life, which was the realest sentence I'd handed her in 4 months that wasn't wrapped inside a lie about my job title. She said that was a boring answer. I told her boring is underrated. She has no idea she just received the truest thing I've ever said to her. It happened again. Smaller and faster. 2 weeks later. We're at her kitchen table, dinner mostly finished, and I've got my mouth halfway open to tell her something real. Not everything, just a thread of it. Maybe just the name of one of my companies, just to hear what it would feel like to say one true noun out loud inside her apartment. When my phone buzzes against the table. My accountant. A tenant issue at one of the properties that can't wait until morning. I take the call standing by the window, my back half turned, giving short, clipped answers that could belong to any kind of work in the world. By the time I sit back down, the moment has folded itself shut. Maya doesn't ask who it was. She just slides my plate back toward me and asks if I want the rest of the wine. I almost told her, I think later, brushing my teeth alone across town in the apartment she's actually seen. I didn't. The thing that stopped me wasn't a decision. It was just a phone ringing at exactly the wrong half second, and I still don't know days later whether I'm relieved or disappointed that it was that easy to let the moment pass. There's no fourth rule for the actual telling. The first 3 rules exist to find someone safe enough to eventually tell. Nobody's ever built a rule for the confession itself because a confession isn't a filter, it's a leap, and leaps don't come with instructions. They just come with a moment where you finally decide the waiting has started costing more than the risk ever would. What I do know, sitting there most nights with a cat that isn't mine asleep on a leg attached to a body worth more than the building I'm sitting in, is that I spent 10 years building a fortune out of pure patience, buying things nobody else wanted because I was willing to outlast everyone else in the room, and now I'm applying that exact same discipline to a woman who has no idea she's the most carefully evaluated decision I have ever made in my life. Except this isn't an acquisition. And some nights, that one distinction is the only thing that lets me sleep. Money was never the hard part. Money shows up when you're patient and a little lucky and willing to do unglamorous things for years without telling a single person. Trust doesn't work that way. Trust doesn't compound on a spreadsheet. You can't diversify it, can't hedge it, can't insure it against the version of you that only exists in someone's head until you finally give them a reason to update it. I'll tell her soon. I've started rehearsing it in the shower the way I used to rehearse pitches to sellers who didn't know yet that I was the buyer. Except this time, I'm the one who's been hiding the asking price. Somewhere out there tonight, some other man with too much money and not nearly enough patience is on a fourth date at a place with a wine list that costs more than most people's rent, watching someone's eyes light up at the bottle instead of at him, mistaking the light for something it isn't. He'll find out the truth in about 4 months. I know because I found out the expensive way twice before I built the rules that got me here. I'm sitting on a couch that isn't mine, holding a secret that's gotten heavier every week I've kept it, for a woman who has never once asked me for a single thing, except whether I fixed a leak. I didn't fix the leak, but for the first time in longer than I can honestly measure, I think I might actually be ready to fix this. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you had everything and could hide it perfectly, would you? Or is the whole point of love that eventually someone has to see the real number and trust you anyway? Tell me in the comments what you'd do in Leon's position. And if this story hit you somewhere honest, hit subscribe. Because next week, I'm telling you what happened the night Maya finally found out the truth.